Welcome to NOCLIP, the podcast that's like a book club for people who think that books don't reward them enough for being good at them. I'm Chad Ruthermans.
And I'm Andy Kinnick.
And today, we're going to be talking about Resident Evil VII, Biohazard.
But first, if you could give us a like or a rating, it would be greatly appreciated.
Resident Evil 7 is a game that was released in 2017, developed by Capcom, and was released on PC, PS4, and Xbox One. And we found an interesting tidbit about it being released as the cloud version, streaming to Nintendo Switches only in Japan.
Yeah, I remember it was weird to read that because they had someone published a news article about them releasing like cloud games to Switch like years ago, but then I feel like it never happened, at least in America.
Mm.
And this was a weird reminder that was indeed a thing.
Yeah, it was one of those things that got tried, and I bet just wasn't successful enough to continue doing.
Mm-hmm.
But Resident Evil 7 is a survival horror game, as it being an entry in the Resident Evil franchise probably tipped off. But notably, if you've played all the Resident Evil games in a row in order, then you'll notice that there's this dip at around Resident Evil 4 where the franchise starts to lose a bit of its like survival horror-y roots,
Mm-hmm.
and dips into being more of like an action series with a lot of very large guns and rocket launchers and a lot of like set pieces and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And Resident Evil 7 was, even as it was like being announced, the goal of development in this game was to bring the game back to how survival horror was back when the first couple of games in the series came out. And I, upon the replay with this in mind and knowing that I was going to have to talk about the game, am incredibly surprised at what a good job they did of striking that balance between a modern sensibility and that like late 90s survival horror sort of like genre tropes.
Yeah, I think, and this is just like a semantic thing, but like to me it reads more as they wanted to modernize the series and they looked at like modern horror games, and it seems like they looked to things like Outlast or like Amnesia and things of that nature and tried to make a game in that style, and they've like added in these pick and chose elements from like the first 3 Resident Evil games to like incorporate into the design in such a way that I love the result. Like I think it all meshes really well. And it was having played the demo a bunch when it came out, it was like surreal almost to play this full game and have it not stop after the first hour.
Yeah. We actually did. This is one of the rare occurrences. Like, the only other time this could possibly happen based on our current catalog is if Silent Hills actually came out.
Or Final Fantasy 15.
Oh, no. Did we talk about a demo of Final Fantasy 15?
No, I was just saying we played it, though, before it came out.
I'm thinking, like, you could go back and listen to our impressions about the demo of this game.
Okay.
Though I don't recommend it because that episode has this clicking noise. It literally happened 4 years ago, and it's been bothering me ever since.
I think, having now done some audio editing myself, that it's a noise removal thing.
We could have removed it?
No,
it was
caused by it. Like, I don't know exactly what it is, but sometimes when you run noise removal, it'll add in this little clicking noise. So that's why you always got to like listen to a decent chunk of it after you remove noise to make sure nothing got fucked up.
I'm pretty sure what actually happened was I had brought a stove into the room we were recording in and was trying to turn it on.
The whole time. Like, you guys are going to love this pizza that I'm going to bake for you. But anyway.
Once we're done recording this podcast.
Enough behind the scenes.
Yeah. But yeah, so we did play the demo, and the demo came out, and when the demo came out, very unfortunately for them, It came out very close to PT's release, and so a lot of people thought that Resident Evil 7 was a game that was informed, including us. We talked about this on that episode. That was going to be informed by how successful PT was and like how well received it was.
Mm-hmm.
And while I can't specifically say that that isn't the case, or that they were influenced, because in all likelihood it's probably a mix of both.
Mm-hmm.
But it isn't the same in that way, and I feel like you cannot remove the Resident Evil DNA from this game.
Yeah, I think I read that this game was in development for at least a year when PT, the demo, came out. So I think it's just a coincidence.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm sure a little bit of influence wormed its way in there after the release of PT and how popular it was.
Yeah.
But it feels mostly like its own thing.
Yeah, and this game is like... You mentioned that it seems like it took some inspiration from like what were popular horror games at the time in the form of Amnesia and Outlast and things of that nature. And very much like when a big company takes a thing that smaller companies are doing and tries to put their version on it. They also gave it a stupid ass name because on the back of the box they refer to having a first person camera. Something that's been being done in video games since the dawn of time as isolation view, which means nothing.
I'm sure that was a marketing department thing.
Yeah, it was.
What's a spicy thing that we could call this?
So why not just call it what it actually is? They're like, nah, fuck that isolation view.
But before we get too far away with it from it, I kind of wanted to start by actually talking about the demo, unless that sounds unappealing and boring to you.
I mean, as long as we're not retreading, I think I'm fine with it.
It seems interesting to revisit because it's been so long since we played/talked about it. But yeah, we mentioned that we like played this multiple times. Like, it's one of those, like, I don't usually like demos, but I think, and I mentioned the Final Fantasy 15 one, like the Platinum demo. I know a lot of people didn't like that, like, because it isn't very representative of what the final product is like. But I really loved that demo, and I really loved the beginning hour demo for this game because I think they provide their own, like, unique experience that almost feels like its own standalone thing.
Yeah.
And I don't know how much more effort that takes, because, like, in the case of Final Fantasy, it felt like they made everything they made for that demo more or less like from scratch, or they like took jigsaw pieces from other places in the game and like jammed them all together for that demo. And in this case, it feels like it was on the front end where they like designed the beginning of it to be able to be chopped off and released as a demo,
as a vertical slice.
Yeah, like as on its own. And I think both approaches work and are, I think, super effective in, at least for someone like me, like capturing my interest.
Yeah, beginning hour is a great like demo for the reason that it doesn't like hazard to offer like a taste of what the whole game is like. It gives you, I mean, there are arguments to be made about how the game is, but I think that it takes part of the best part of the game and then just hands it to you and be like, you know, you want to keep doing this. So it definitely is successful as like an advertising strategy. I do want to say I am a little bit disappointed how much of it is just wholesale in the beginning of this game. Like, I realize that it's called beginning hour, so it is exactly what it says on the tin, but it is like, basically, you start this game, and then eventually you put in a videotape that might as well be called the demo to this game. And then you put that into a VCR and play the demo again. But the cool thing is that if you played the demo, you can remember with your big brain that there's the lever underneath the fireplace, and so you actually don't have to play it again, which is my A+ favorite thing about the demo, is that it gives you that little, it's like there's a little bit of carryover.
Did you actually do that?
Yeah.
Oh, see, I went and looked and did not see a prompt to pull the lever. So I thought they actually blocked you from doing that.
No.
Because I wasn't able to do it.
I've played through this game fully twice.
Uh-huh.
And I have played the first hour of this game outside of the demo probably like 6 times, or watched other people play it. I don't know how that keeps happening, but I would like boot the game up to play it again after I played it when it came out, and I'd play a little bit of it, save, quit, and then just never come back to it. So yeah, there's been a number of times, but I always normally I do watch the tape, but this most recent time I was trying to fight motion sickness, so I did not.
Yeah. I mean, it had been so long since I'd done it, I probably just looked in slightly the wrong place, but who knows?
Yeah. No, it is there, and you can grab it.
Yeah, but anyway, so you mentioned right off the bat, in the first hour of the game, they get into one of my favorite things about Resident Evil 7, which is the found footage VHS tapes.
Yeah.
So you'll find these tapes, and then there will be random TVs with VCRs where you can watch them. And when you put them on, you actually play through this like found footage thing. And they use them really cleverly because they give you information about your surroundings. And I love the concept so much. Like I feel like you could even focus in even more on that concept and make a game that revolves more specifically around that, like doing some stuff in one timeline, getting a tape, getting more info to progress, and you kind of jump back and forth. But yeah, I love the implementation.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the VHS tapes are like a really good inclusion as a way to sort of break up the main parts of the game. The trick with Resident Evil 7, and I'm going to say that, and what I mean by that is the trick in all old Resident Evil games as well, is that the environment is actually very small. You can get around to a lot of places very quickly. And so the design goal, and I will parlay this into a talk about level design later, but the areas are really small, and because you can move around them so quickly, the intricacy of everything inside of them has to be really high in order to make sure that the game, like, you know, is a challenge, has something for you to do in it. And the videotapes are a great way to insert like a 10 to 20 minute little vignette of a thing to do in a single room, reusing other assets that they use in other parts of the game. And so it accomplishes like a whole bunch of different little goals. So in addition to being thematically very cool, and like look interesting and do interesting things, it's also like a great little like game design technique to like preview other areas and things that you're going to do and everything else about it. And I don't know. I love them. I think they're great. And they make great use of the first person camera. Like they have an excuse for them, I guess, which is positive.
Yeah, and like you're explicitly playing a cameraman for like a Ghost Adventure style TV show for the very first one, which is a nice touch, I think.
Yeah, and like in Mia's, she has a camera because she's trying to like record a message to get it to Ethan. And then in the birthday one, presumably Lucas just fitted you with a camera so that he could observe your like results.
Yeah, I feel like he mentions it, that he's put like a GoPro on your head or something like that.
Right. Probably with a bomb attached to it or some dumb shit. But yeah, so that's to segue from what I was talking about a little bit earlier. I think that part of what this game borrows from the early Resident Evil games is that intricate level design. And when I started this game for the first time and played through it, I remember saying, like, this is weird. Like, you go in this area and then you fall into, like, some water and then you wade through the water and then you're in this, like, underground network of things. And then the further you get in the game, you realize how interconnected everything is. And, like, I definitely thought that the Baker household was like a TARDIS situation, like way bigger on the inside than it needed to be. But when you look at the map and you look at what you can physically see, everything actually does fit together. And it's really clever at times where different rooms in the basement will be a wall away from other areas. And so when they get broken down, you can move between them. So there's lots of like shortcut opening and like little traversal things. Find the key, elevator down to Firelink Shrine, get like the key cards to get into the into Lucas's area, that kind of a thing. And it's really like that. I appreciated that way more than I anticipated that I was going to, even that though the game is kind of separated into 3 sections.
Yeah, it's very like Metroid Prime, like very like 3D Metroidvania kind of in its design. And I'm a big slut for that, especially in like I think it fits really well in a horror game, like having a one location. There's a couple different houses, but like it's one like family property that's just really dense and like woven together. Like that's like my favorite kind of level design in most games. And they do it really well here. And I think it's clever because it feels like each different house or like section of the game feels like it's harkening back to like a different element of Resident Evil. Like the main house feels a lot like a condensed, simplified version of like the mansion from the first game.
Right.
And the second or the third house or wherever that area is,
that's the Resident Evil 4 house.
It's the one that's filled with traps. It's got all the tripwires, and it was really cool to like see that pop up. I'm like, oh, this is how they're incorporating this. Like I recognize that. Yeah, and like I had something for the second house, but now I'm blanking on it.
Well, the second house really is very close to the design of the first house in like a lot of ways. It has the same sort of like interconnected up and down. It's just a lot more linear, and they're the outdoor areas.
It's not as focused on like the lock and key style puzzles like the first house is. It's more like you're being stalked.
Yeah.
So you can maybe compare that to Resident Evil 2 because you got like the enemy that stalks you through the whole thing. But it's kind of loose, but it's more like, I want to say it's more combat focused, but it's mostly just kind of like swarms of bugs flying at you. So,
which is technically combat in some ways. Yeah, so we're going to jump directly into spoilers on this one.
Oh,
so
yeah. If you were unaware, this is a spoiler-riddled podcast.
Yeah. But this leaves this odd man out, right, that we're not talking about, called a big fucking boat.
Oh, right. We're getting into it already, huh? I thought we would save it for later.
No, I mean, we'll talk about everything else about it later.
Okay.
But the boat is dumb as hell, as far as, like... The boat is the clearest example of padding that this game has, I think. Like,
yeah, I don't think it would even be as bad if it wasn't so long.
Yeah. It's like the longest part of the game, and it's the least cleverly designed of all of them. It's a
lot of back and forth.
Yeah, an elevator and 3 floors that have actual exploration to do. It feels like the game wrapped up, and then somebody play tested it, and they were like, I got through. That was like 5 hours. Like, what are we gonna do? And so they added like another boss fight and a whole other area to try and like drag it out for longer. It felt very like. I mean, it feels very Resident Evil, if I'm being, like, real honest with you. Like, putting that shit at the end, like, that felt like the military base island in Resident Evil 4, where it just feels really out of place, and, like, the zombies are using stun batons. This game's version is, there's a creepy girl. I don't know. You get a machine gun.
Yeah, like, and the thing is, like, I don't think it really needed to be, because, like, I can imagine a version of it that's good, because, like, it's a surprise, and if it had been more, like, quick and more of, like, a set piece and less running around, at the beginning you have, like, no weapons, you know? Like, it's just kind of, okay, let's get to the point here.
Let's wrap it up.
Let's wrap it up.
Put the red light on in the back. Yeah, it's weird that is there. But everything in the main house is really good. And it kind of plays into what my overall... I have, like, a big heaping pile on one side of the scales, weighing it down heavily on one side, of things that I think this game does really incredibly well. and then I have this one pretty dense morsel on the other side that's like the Capcom baggage, right? That's just like sitting there, and the boat is like a big part of it. The fact that it's like the boat and then the cave afterward, where they're just like, we have to incorporate Umbrella into this somehow. And so here's a bunch of documents to read, and Mia has like a weird secret backstory where she's a member of like a shady government organization who's trying to get this virus, bioweapons, and all that shit. And it's like, you could just leave it vague. Like, there would be people who would be angry about it, but like, fuck those people.
Yeah. I think I agree it would be better if they treated this more like its own IP and didn't really get into that stuff, but I was expecting it like at every moment, because especially like the demo had like a manila folder that you could find
with the Umbrella Corporation logo on it.
On a helicopter. Like there's a picture of it. So I was just waiting for that drop at any moment, and I was actually really pleased that they didn't get into it till like the end.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, more power to them, because the more that the beginning part of this game can stand on its own, I think the better this game looks in retrospect.
Yeah.
The end of this game feels like they just needed to plug in everything that they wanted to get in for the plot, so that they could set up for some other shit that they were going to do down the road, like a comic book or something.
Yeah, and then like I was trying to say about the boat, like I don't even hate the idea. Like I kind of like the idea of like tying it in with the larger like Resident Evil universe. It does feel like ham-fisted.
Yeah, and it is just overly long for what it's worth.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's narrow this conversation down a lot. Let's talk about the actual beginning of this game, because there are parts of this game that I super duper like, and most of them can be found in the first 1 hour of the game. I think
it's really strong.
It's incredibly strong. The like design of what is effectively a tutorial in this game, where you don't really have anything with which to defend yourself, and they don't introduce normal enemies yet, gives you this like house, which is, I want to say, pretty. You played this in a more high fidelity version than I did. I think that the house looks really good, but I had VR blur, where everything was like a little bit bad. So, so how does it hold up as much as I remember it holding up from playing it on PC?
Yeah, I think it holds up. There's always like some things, like some of the stuff that you pick up and you like twirl around Resident Evil style can look a little bit, when you look at them real close, they don't hold up under scrutiny as well. But most everything I think looks pretty good. The people are the only thing that I think is aged, especially Mia's hair. Mia's hair looks really weird. I don't know what it is about how the RE engine renders hair, but that was weird. And some of the lip syncing stuff, like there's the video that plays at the beginning of like the message that Mia made, and it's maybe a little bit too off from the lips, but yeah, just little things, like little bits of jank. Like on the whole, I think it holds up well. Yeah, visually.
And I think that's like a big thing that they were striving for when they set out to make this game, is they wanted to make it a high, because you're in first person, so like it's necessary for the textures to hold up a little bit better, because you're going to be right the fuck up on them. So there's a lot of detail put into the house, and there's a lot of clutter and things all around, so that like everything feels a little bit more natural than it does in most Resident Evil games. Like,
yeah, it's very small, or as we were saying, it's smaller, denser areas, and like you can spend more processing power on making things look nice, and a lot of things are like darker. Like another comparison to Metroid Prime. Yeah. You have these more enclosed, smaller areas that are like a little bit more dimly lit, and then you can really crank that fidelity.
It's true, and the darkness also plays a big part of the visual style of this game. There are very few areas that are like actually brightly lit, and when you're in them, they usually feel like a little weird. The dim lighting, like the large old house lit by a 60-watt bulb, is like the aesthetic for this game, like spot on. It's like a little bit yellowy light, and everything is dingy and kind of hard to see.
Yeah, it's like it's all illuminated by candles. It's kind of how it felt.
And then the game does shit like have a door that you unlock by putting 3 dog head symbols into it.
Classic Resident Evil.
Yeah, which feels really out of place, but then the actual dog heads are always hidden away somewhere where you would hide a key or something. Whereas in like another Resident Evil game, they would be on like a pedestal in the middle of a room.
If I'm giving the game too much credit here, but it almost felt like it is as in place as it could be to me, because like it feels like, because it's set in Louisiana and it's like this old mansion, like I don't know, like maybe it's just media telling me that old houses might have like secret passageways and things, but like it didn't really stand out that much to me.
Yeah, but like the back door would not have a complicated locking mechanism on it.
Sure.
I do agree with a lot of that though, like especially like the Bakers obviously have something to hide. There's a bit of a question. There's a lot of a question about how at the end of this game they decide to make the Bakers a sympathetic family. Like, they are such good villains through most of the main part of the game that turning that around and being like, well, they were being mind controlled, feels a little bit like, it feels like a step backward more than I would want it to be.
Yeah, I feel they might have been concerned with coming off as like stereotyping Southerners. But I don't know. Like, it feels like it makes enough sense to me, like that's like part of the infection is that like it takes over their brain, like it's fungal. Because like there are like fungal parasites that take over the brains of the host.
That's like the whole premise of The Last of Us outbreak. Yeah.
So it makes enough sense, but it does feel a little bit. Maybe what it is the strength of that performance that the voice actor for Jack gives. Like you actually feel bad for him. So, but I don't know.
Well, then, and like the strength of his performance also just as a villain, though. Like he did a really good job with that character and making him as menacing as he is. To the point where I think once you get past Jack's section of the game, the overall like actual scariness of the game drops pretty significantly. And that's combined with a lot of other things that we can talk about when we get into mechanics, because it's a mostly mechanical problem, in my opinion. Arguably not even a problem, depending on who you are. But that the Baker family as villains, I think, are really good. And in defense of it being a stereotype, like, this ain't Deliverance. Like, there's definitely an understanding of what Deliverance was when they were making these characters, but also like they are like doing science experiment, like weird botany science in a basement that seems like it was made for them and not dug out just in the amount of time that they've been. I don't know. There's a lot of like there's a lot of medical scientific detritus around. There's too much of it for me to be like, they were innocent the whole time. They at least had like a meth lab down there or something.
Yeah. It's built on top of a military base or something.
It's like an Indian burial ground, but like way worse. Oh God. So yeah, I started that whole conversation by talking about the intro when you're in the guest house.
Oh, right.
And we made it to the main house already, so that's good, I guess. So I played this game in VR. And I'm just going to insert this in now because I've wanted to for a while, but I was always too motion sick to continue with it. But this time I committed and just fucking did the whole thing. And the guest house part, immediately I was like, oh no, is this is this gonna be the thing that makes video games scary again? Because I got to a point in the intro before you even get to the guest house where some crows fly by you. And like fucking jumped out of my chair like the crows were really eating my flesh, like in a Hitchcock movie. Like it was real visceral fear that I felt when those crows flew by. So I feel like the guest houses, and also a lot of the enemies generally, is really designed, I think, to take advantage of the idea of it being in first person, and therefore VR just sort of intensifies that. There's a sequence in the guest house where you're like wading through some like flooded out basement area, and you have to like crawl under this thing, and then a corpse like floats up. That is good. Like
Oh, yeah?
They do so many things that are just like these little like spooky moments that happen in every Resident Evil game, but the fact that it is in first person makes them work that much better. And to separate it from the Outlasts and the Amnesias, you know that in a Resident Evil game you have health and a health bar that you have to manage by picking up resources which are limited, and ammo and guns and shit. And so when something startles you, it never feels initially like it's probably just a set piece thing. It feels like it could have consequences, which is why you're more on your guard. And I'm not saying that Resident Evil is the only series that does this, but it is a series that does do this, and this game is like that. And so, yeah, like, when I say that's real good, I do mean it is real good, and also that it makes you feel mechanically at odds with the environment.
Yeah, I think it pretty obviously is the case that, like, VR and horror go hand in hand. I think they released a demo for this, a VR demo that was just called Kitchen. And it was, I think it was like a modified part version of like where Ethan wakes up in the kitchen and the family's sitting around him and they eat cockroaches and shit. And it was like one of those things where they're like, oh, everyone's pissing their pants at this crazy new demo. So yeah, it just seems like something that like when you put a VR headset on, things in a game feel more like they're actually happening to you, and when things feel like they're actually happening to you, they can be a lot scarier. And I already think like as an adult, like I find that I still like scary movies, but they rarely like actually scare me anymore. And like video games, I find like horror games to be like 3 times more effective at the least than movies are. So like I imagine VR just amplifies it even more.
Yeah.
I wanted to try out the VR version, but didn't get the chance before recording, and I get horrible motion sickness, so it probably wouldn't have worked out anyway.
Yeah. In the very aptly titled episode, Bad for My Tum Tum, which we did on Deracine, I talk about how Resident Evil 7 is a very bad game in VR for motion sickness. And I hold to my arguments, but I am under the impression that you can like get used to it. It's not playing the game in VR versus playing the game with a controller is not a significantly different mechanical experience other than you're aiming with your head and it's a lot harder to turn. So there's a little give and take in that. So like, it probably won't influence much of what I talk about, but the actual like gameplay experience is really similar. I just wanted to mention that so that it's out there if I say something fucking weird and wacky, that could be an explanation for it, or I'm insane. So one of those things.
So you mentioned Deracine there, and that's the one full game I've played in VR, and even that, it isn't a horror game at all, but even that has moments that are like scary. Like VR really does just kind of lend itself, like I don't know. There's a whole can of worms there. Like, we could get into a VR discussion, but like, I hope that in the coming years, like, advancements are made in the technology that make it like more accessible and cheaper.
Yeah.
So that we could see more just games produced for it.
Yeah. Yeah, it'd be really nice. Because it is like such a novel experience currently, and it does enhance things, especially when you can actually just sort of like sit back and let yourself think that you're in a weird house.
You can be welcomed to the family in VR.
Comma, son. Yeah, so let's talk about Resident Evil 7? No, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Because I feel like the core horror that this game, at least the one that it markets itself on, is basically the same as the Tobe Hooper classic, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, where you have this family who are introduced as cannibals, kind of. They're eating people, presumably, at the beginning, though that is not really ever touched on from what I can tell.
No, I don't think so.
It's real weird.
I think it feels like it's implied, but that might just be our associations with things like Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
That's very possible.
As you're getting at. Because they do, it is evidence that they have just, there's like as you said, that corpse that pops up in the water, and they have what is it, like an incinerator down in the basement where they burn what's left of the bodies, and stuff. So I don't know,
an incinerator that has like a weird unlocking mechanism to it, which is odd, but
they've got lots of weird unlocking mechanisms in this house.
That's true. It's the Capcom architectural college they went to.
And all the fridges seem to have some kind of rank, rancid shit in them, so those are probably body parts, right? That's
also true. They were microwaving a crow in the beginning as well. So I am altogether too fascinated by the diet of the Baker family. They do seem very in shape, though, so it must be working out for them. Maybe crow... Maybe when somebody says eat crow, they mean get in shape.
It's just not everything that they eat, their body rejects, so they're all just very skinny.
Yeah, it makes sense. But yeah, I guess that's part of why I would have liked to have seen more of the Baker family being the villain in the game. Is just because it feels like their story had more interesting places that it could have gone. And them just being brainwashed kind of like doesn't gel with what happens in the rest of the game. So I don't know.
Yeah, and it feels like as it goes, like you end on what's the son's name? Lucas. Yeah, you end on him, and he seems like he's like a crazy guy, but he seems the least like monstrous of all of them. He seems the most like just a guy who's unhinged. So I think that also kind of leaves that on a weird note. Like, it kind of shifts the focus. I don't know, in a weird way. And then, but I mean, you do fight Jack as the final boss, who is looking even more monstrous than ever.
Yeah, Capcom. Capcom, listen up. When you're making a Resident Evil final boss, just try one time to have less than 10 legs, and don't put glowy eyeballs on it. It's like every time. I was impressed, though. You do not kill the fake final boss. Jag is not the actual final boss, because you do that weird set piece thing.
Yeah.
But it was novel not to shoot a rocket launcher at it. There was no rocket launcher in this game, which is probably a good thing, but I think it might be the first Resident Evil game where you don't beat a boss with a rocket launcher. The thing you beat the actual final boss, is dropped out of a helicopter, though, which is a classic Resident Evil thing. Move on.
I don't know if I had that much more on that, but because it almost seems like it's taking the opposite trajectory at first. Like, you fight Jack and he's, considerably more human than Marguerite. Is that her name? Yeah, like she's just like a weird bug monster, basically, who crawls
big distended
around.
limbs, and births little flying insects at you.
But then it goes back the other way.
It's okay, so I'm at the very end, like maybe even after final thoughts. I'm gonna talk about the DLC a bit.
Okay.
And so there's gonna be an addendum to this statement, but you do find some documents in the cave at the end of this game where that basically say that Lucas was infected and then he got the cure because he's working with people who are trying to produce or like do experiments with this bioweapon.
Okay.
Which is Evie or Evelyn or
right.
The E type E whatever.
E who must not be named.
E who must not be named. Voldemort.
Yes. Moldymort.
Moldymort. We finally got there after about 15 tries.
Swish.
So like he is infected in the game, then is cured, and presumably this happens a long time before, at least a couple weeks before you show up at the house, which means that Lucas, a non-infected regular person, was like, I'm just gonna play along and eat people.
Yeah.
It really does, like every bit
he was already like that before.
I mean, you're right, he doesn't seem super like collected.
Yeah.
Though he did win the fucking amateur robotics contest in Louisiana in like 2004.
Yeah, I think they're trying to go for like a mad genius thing with him.
But it seems like his strength is definitely in making traps and shit, and not in biochemistry.
Yeah, just he ate so many brains that he became so much smarter.
Yeah, he grew up on a diet of brains.
Yeah.
Is what it was. Oh god. But yeah, the whole narrative of this game, which I think is what I'm settling on what it is that we're talking about.
Sure. We're just big picture here on the first half.
Is like, it is like so ideal with what I would want from this kind of a game until that ending that I think is what makes me dislike the ending as much as I do, is just because I don't like Ethan, but that's good. Like, I shouldn't like Ethan. He's kind of a tool. And it feels like you really are fighting to get away from this. And then the more and more Resident Evil stuff it puts in, the less, like, actually frightening it is. Like, once you're outside, I mean, Ethan does seem like he's pretty into the idea of saving Mia. But
it is his wife.
Yeah. Or his girlfriend? I don't know if they're actually married.
I was pretty sure that they were married, but I'm not 100% sure.
I would need a legal document to keep me in that house after I got out of the first door. There should, like, Zoe calls up, like, yo, you gotta get the head and the arm so I can make a serum to cure. I'd be like, oh. No. There's a gap in the fence. I'm just gonna fucking leave. So there's some definite like pull into contrivance, but I think it all fits sort of the horror movie aesthetic they're going for.
Yeah, like overall the main story is pretty simple, and it has like a more like complex like backstory and lore or whatever you want to say, and which is I think exactly what you want in a horror game. Like you don't want to muddy the waters with like a complex plot while you're going through it. You just want to kind of let the game happen. And
the game does in fact happen. It happens to you pretty violently, and I think we should talk about those things after the break. We don't plan those. We're just so in sync that we've managed to say them at the same time like 2 times ever.
Perfect synchronicity.
Synchronicity 2. by the police.
Electric Boogaloo.
Welcome back. We were very all over the place in that first half, so let's try and pick a theme and kind of go with it, because I'm sure there's still a lot we have to cover. And the thing for me that jumps out that I have a lot of thoughts on are just sort of the mechanics of the game.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it plays a big role in both how this game was retooled from previous Resident Evil games to match more with the way that the older games played, as well as just sort of like trying to make the game as scary as possible, I guess. Because this is the first Resident Evil game in a long time that I feel like has focused more on the horror aspects than the science fiction ones. And a big part of that is item management, which is, I guess, kind of a really boring thing to talk about, but it's just so important to the way that the game plays. Because the game has gone back to having a pretty tight inventory limit, at least for the first, like, 2/3 of the game, where you will often run out of space unless you intentionally trek back to drop stuff off in those boxes. And for my taste, I think it's a little too easy to do that. Like, I think that the game would have benefited from having to make you make more important choices about what things you're carrying with you at any given time. But I can also see the argument that I would make where I'm like, I hate that I can't carry all this shit around.
Now, I think the inventory management is more core to the Resident Evil experience than maybe you're implying. But because I felt like it was too streamlined in this. Like, when I think back to, I've only played 4 and a little bit of the first game, and like when I think back to those, like having to like manage the inventory feels like a standout part, because like not only like you have to make decisions about what you take with you, but like how much ammo you're going to need. Like, you're actively thinking about how many bullets you're going to take with you and things like that. And this game streamlines it, I think, too much, where it's like everything just pops into place automatically. Like, you don't have to like flip things around and make enough room. And I don't know. Yeah, that part, it just felt, they simplified it to the point where it just felt like a non-thing almost.
Yeah. I think no, I do agree with you. I think that inventory management has been a part of it is and will always be a part of the Resident Evil series. Like, I think that is it's important to the genre. Like, survival horror wouldn't be the same if there wasn't some kind of thought about resource, and a very interesting and good way of making you think about resources is just what's your carry capacity? Like, how much can you actually take with you? But if you think back to Resident Evil 1, one of the big reasons that the characters have like differing difficulty levels is that one of them can carry more stuff, and that is in itself a huge boon. Resident Evil 1 is absolutely the biggest, most restrictive of all of the games in the franchise, as far as how much you can actually hold on you at one time, whereas Resident Evil 4 has the inventory Tetris, where you have to like fit things in based on how big they are in squares, which I love. And this game doesn't really have. It has like kind of a callback to it in the fact that some things take up 2 squares, but like it just never is as much of a problem as I think it should be. So I do agree with you. I think it is a core Resident Evil thing, and I think that it should have been harder in this game.
Yeah.
Because, like, I was never thinking about how many bullets I was taking with me, because I was just taking all the bullets with me. Like, I wasn't going to leave bullets behind.
Yeah, like, you had the feeling, like, in the 4th one, where you get you want to, like, buy a new weapon from the shopkeeper guy. But it's always, like, you have, like, mixed feelings about it, because it's, like, a new weapon, but it's also one or two less slots that you can, like, put herbs in.
Right.
You know, so like there's always, it's almost like it's a double-edged sword, or like you're always weighing what you should do, what you should buy, what you should all that stuff.
Yeah, I think that the thought process that went into it, whether or not we think that it ended up as balanced as it could have been, is in Resident Evil 4, you get an abundance of supplies as opposed to in other Resident Evil games.
Mm-hmm.
And so having a smaller inventory means that you have to choose what types of things you're going to carry with you at any given time. Whereas in Resident Evil 7, you're not given as much stuff. Like, you are more often starving for supplies than you are starving for inventory space. And I don't necessarily think that that is bad, but I think that if there was tension on both sides, then it would have actually been more interesting.
Yeah.
And also, like, just trekking back to safe zones is pretty simple.
Yeah.
And I don't know exactly how you solve that problem, because
other than having less of them.
Yeah, or more enemies.
Or
more enemies would be worse, because then you're bleeding people of supplies who are stuck in the game and are backtracking to find things.
Yeah, and it might be blasphemous or maybe just a little bit too like inconsistent or whatever and messy. But like you could just have it so not every save room had a crate.
Yeah. This game had crates that weren't even in save rooms. They were just like, fuck it, here's a box. All your stuff's in it.
I feel like that was only like in one place.
I think it's more than... It's in at least two, because there's the one outside of the puzzle room,
right,
where you have to drop all your stuff off, and there's also one outside of... I want to say it's outside of Jack's boss room, or it's outside of the garage. It's one of those two. It has a box like just in a corner.
It's. I think it's outside of the boss room.
Mm-hmm. It's like a briefcase. It's not a full crate. Yeah.
So I mean, it makes sense that they put one in those two spots.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, and it makes sense, but it is like they couldn't just keep them in the save rooms. Like they had to also spread them out, because the house is like the biggest contiguous area in the game. Has multiple save rooms in it as well. So yeah, I don't know, it's interesting the way that it's broken up, and like you could see them trying to distance them from other places. Like if you were in the second house, Marguerite's zone, and wanted to run back to a box, it's all the way outside and across a gap. So like you have to make a pretty significant trek to go to it. So like, and it worked, like for me anyway. Like in that area, I just didn't go. I managed my inventory. I didn't pick up stuff if I was full. I tried to combine things to constrain the amount of stuff that I had with me at any given time, in order to make like the make it as streamlined as possible for me, which put more pressure on my inventory, which I think was better. So it stumbles in a few places, and I think that Lucas's is overall less... Like, it has a few places that feel like very intentionally designed to drain resources. Like, there's a hallway where there's like 2 bombs, and then a 4-legged molded spawns behind you, and then 3 of the regular ones spawn in front of you. And it's like, you can't just go around them, so you kind of have to shoot at least a few of them. So there's no real way to conserve there. The game just wants to get rid of your bullets at that point.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily like how that feels either. Like, I would prefer it if everything felt like an intentional choice on the player's side.
Yeah, I don't know. That landed okay with me, like at that point in the game, that it's like... Because I feel like it does feel like you're making a choice to, like, shoot every box once you find out that they explode. So, I don't know. I thought that was okay.
Those do have a mimic tell.
Oh, I didn't know.
Yeah,
or never noticed.
I didn't know on my first playthrough, but I noticed them this time. They have, like, one less rope of tape around them. Yeah. But... even that, I feel like, is a concession. Like, that didn't need to be there. Like, they could have just looked like regular boxes.
Yeah, I mean, the last thing I think I'll say on the inventory space is that there were multiple times where I would just be like, need to pick something up, and then I would just be like, what do I have that's like a low amount of ammo? I'll just shoot it all at the ground, and then to get rid of it and pick something else up. And that never felt like bad to do. So I feel like, yeah, they end up giving you too much space by the end, and like they could have it could have been more tightly balanced, I think.
Yeah.
On at least for the regular difficulty.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I have not played the game on Madhouse, and I don't really have much of a desire to ever do it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know what's different about it. I know that enemy and item placements are different, and so because of that, I will leave the door open to maybe there's a more pure survival horror experience in here that I just didn't have. But I think that those elements, the less stressful ones, should have been carried over into the other difficulties as well.
Mm-hmm. But to shift topics, right after the beginning hour, or whatever we want to call it, the guest house, you wake up in the kitchen and they play their little scene, and then the family leaves, and I think this is my least favorite part of the game, is when you're first in the main house and you kind of have to stealth around and avoid getting caught by Jack. And I remember, like, I got through the beginning of it, got to that part, tried it a couple times, and got killed. And I was like, well, that's enough for tonight. And then the next day I asked you, like, how much of the game is just that? Because, like, it really kind of rubbed me the wrong way. Like, I really don't like that part. And I was wondering what you think of that kind of early stealth section.
Yeah, so bumping elbows again a little bit with the DLC. Stealth in this game, stealth in first person, is a difficult thing to pull off. And it is not what this game is built around. And it sucks real bad. Because my answer to that question when you asked was, oh, I forgot that there was stealth even in the game, because it doesn't really come up ever again. When I had said that, I had not yet played the DLC, and there is a stealth element to it. But for the most part, there's some like stay out of line of sight of the patrolling bad guy in Marguerite's section, but they made the choice of not giving Marguerite eyes or ears or a sense of smell at all. So you just kind of walk around 8 inches away from her, and she'll never notice you in a million years. She basically has to like catch you red-handed, like open a door into the room you're in for her to actually see and attack you. So they even toned back on it pretty significantly at that point in the game. So, you know, I don't know. I don't like it very much either. I think it has a cool set piece feel to it. The dinner table, and then Evelyn, who is grandma, goes missing, and you get to find some like little bits and pieces, maybe get a hint about a puzzle you're going to do later, and him busting through the wall. Like, all of that is like cool set dressing to a mechanical experience that feels like dog shit. So yeah, I don't know. And it's not very clear either about what it is you're supposed to be doing. So it's kind of a failure of a section, but it comes hot off the heels of a pretty good part of the game.
Yeah, because like I know when we talked about the demo and PT, we were speculating on like what the full game might be like, and there was like part of my cynical brain that was like the game will progress to just be like less and less like the demo is, in more like the more action-y Resident Evil games. And when I sat down to play the full game, like I played through the beginning and was like, oh yeah, that's just as good as I remembered. And then we get to this part, and I'm like, oh no.
I want it to become more action-y, like other Resident Evil games.
Yeah, maybe it isn't going in the action direction, but it's definitely going in a direction I don't like, and it was very off-putting. So,
and that's fair. I think that initial part of the game is very off. I mean, there's off-putting in a good way in a horror game.
Yeah.
Which is like being force-fed like a weird giblet from a person.
A gibble sandwich.
You're getting force-fed a gibble sandwich. And then there's off-putting in the way that you're like, I feel like there's nothing I can do correctly at this part of the game. which is much worse. Though, it had its like scary moments to it. I don't know. I don't want to write it off as a complete failure, but it is a at least very definite partial failure.
Yeah.
But you move on from that into what is the most Resident Evil-y part of the game, in the main part of the house, where you're solving actual puzzles that are puzzles, where you read things like in an escape room and then collect shit and get guns, and suddenly you have like the ability to do stuff like in the game. And I was impressed by this a lot. I think that the quality of puzzle in the game decreases as time goes on. And they did use a lot of their puzzle budget for the happy birthday section, which I appreciate. It was a cool bit. But it wasn't quite... I feel like a lot of the other puzzles in the game don't really live up to it. But the fact that the beginning was so very Resident Evil made me not even care.
Yeah, and I think that speaks to like what I said in the first half, where like the first house really feels like it's the like lock and key puzzles from Resident Evil 1 like kind of put into this section of the game. Like it feels intentional that there are less later on to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it works really well. And as I've been calling them, I think they're like a particular kind of puzzle, as you said, like escape room style, whereas like you find thing A and put it in place B to progress. And while on paper, when I describe it, that might not sound that interesting, but like I really like that sort of thing in practice.
It has series staple clock puzzles in it, which
yeah, and there's something about being able to take like the pieces and spin them in your hand. Quotes in your hand.
Yeah.
Spin them around and actually look at them like they're physical things in the game world.
Yeah.
Is always cool, and it's not just like a little flat glowy thing that you pick up and then there's just a picture of it in your inventory.
Right. And like the fact that a few of them are even interactable. Like you have those little lock boxes that you can like open and shit. A very nice detail, and something that I do wish they would have been able to go further with. I imagine that wasn't a core design thing that they wanted to work on. So like here's hoping that Village has more of that to it, because they have the engine down already.
Yeah, and I like how like the weapons and things are introduced. Like you go into that main like entry room, and there's just like the shotgun is like being held by like a bust of some guy, with a spotlight on it, and you're like, oh fuck yeah, the shotgun. Yeah. But then you had to like get do an Indiana Jones swap out for something else of the same weight, so you can take it with you. Like I just feel like that kind of stuff was set up really well.
Yeah, and I think that like that's such a good set piece for the shotgun, because like yes, you do have to solve a puzzle to actually get it, but putting it there with that like level of ostentatious display really, it emphasizes that the game, while making it feel in environment, like actually feel like it should be where it is also a wink and a nudge at how important shotguns are, not just in Resident Evil, but in like zombie media as a thing. Like it's an iconic weapon for a reason.
Yeah, and it's even like subtle, like maybe not subtle, but like it is it's like signaling about the game mechanics. Like if you're brand new and you've never played a Resident Evil game, or you don't play like shooters of any kind really, it puts it there under a spotlight and makes it seem important to you. Yeah. So even if you were like an ignorant baby, you would know like shotgun good, because they make you work for it, and they point it out.
Yeah. I think this is probably as good a place as any to talk about the shotgun, and in fact all of the guns in the actual shooting mechanics of this game, because I am absolutely shocked at how like crunchy and solid everything feels. Like it is a survival horror game, and your bullets are precious, and they want every shot to feel like it means something. Like you have to decide to put another bullet into an enemy. And like you need to get worried when something isn't dying as fast as you want it to. And the way that they accomplish that with just the feeling of the guns is just so incredibly satisfying in a way that a game that was more about shooting wouldn't ever be able to pull off, because it would just be sensory overload. But like the amount of damage that that the shotgun feels like it's doing is just incredible. Like it is like you put a shotgun up to this like really oversized easy target of a head and have it just like explode into matter in a way that is just so like satisfying and gross, and it's really good. It's really, really good.
Yeah, like having to like going down to the basement and having to kill the molded, I think they're called.
Yeah.
With the handgun, and then coming back with the shotgun and being able to kill them in one hit if you hit them in the head at close enough range with it. It just it feels great.
Yeah. It's like, it doesn't make me want to save my ass. This is the downfall, is I didn't want to not shoot things.
Oh yeah,
I was having such a good time.
Yeah, going back to the inventory balancing. Yeah, like the shotgun was like what I was walking around with.
Yeah. That is the walking around gun.
Exactly.
I am too set in my ways for that, though. Like, I did always walk around with the pistol, even if it had, like, one bullet. Because I'm like, don't want to accidentally shoot off a shotgun shell. Those are important. Well, plus they also give you... This isn't the time to talk about it, necessarily. But they give you crafting recipes for handgun ammo. Which they don't give you shotgun shells. Those are, you have to scavenge all of those. So it is a very different sort of experience. Like the two, I guess, also go back to the craft, or to the inventory management. There is a very limited crafting thing in this game. There's like, I could literally name all of the things you can craft. There are so few of them. I think it's like 8 in the main game. And I would say 90% of the time, the only things that you're using chem fluid for are just health and bullets. And you wouldn't really ever use them to make the psycho stimulants.
Right.
Or the
Psychobilly Freakout.
Psychovision, the grenade. I forget what it's called. The blue grenade or the red, the incendiary grenade. Like I just didn't ever make those, really. Like the grenade launcher felt like it was such a limited use item that I never wanted to just like bust it out.
Yeah, I never ended up taking it with me.
Oh, I took it to the final boss. Did a good job. But so did the shotgun, though. So shotgun stays useful for the whole game.
Yeah, and I don't want to forget to mention it, but it's when speaking about weapon feel, the thing that comes to my mind is the axe from the beginning of the game. The axe feels so good to use that I'm sad that you don't get one in the main game.
Yeah, it's got that like chunky, and we talked about this, like when you hit a wall,
really sticks in there.
Yeah, and you have to like pull it back out. Like it's a really well designed sort of thing.
Yeah, like when we talked about God of War, we talked about how good it felt to hit things with a Leviathan axe, and part of the reason why that feels so good is because the axe actually like collides with and then sticks in the enemy model for like a second before it like goes through. And I think they have a similar thing going on here. Like when you hit something with it, it like sticks and then it comes out. Like it just feels really really satisfying.
Yeah, I'm glad that we're, and have been at least for 4 years, in an age where the technology exists that it is possible to make a combat system where swords don't completely go through people and then deal a little bit of damage. Like you can actually have combat that feels real and weighty.
Visceral.
Yeah, without relying literally entirely on hit stop and sound effects. Like hit stop and sound effects still play a big role in what makes them feel good.
It's that good animation, baby.
Yeah, you don't have to lose that animation.
Physics and whatever else is contributing.
Right.
But yeah, so I almost feel like that primed me for like my expectations for like how good the other weapons would feel, even though there wouldn't necessarily be a correlation.
That's fair. The knife notably feels like hot trash to use, and I think intentionally so, but like...
You're supposed to use it to bust crates, man.
Yeah, for the most part.
Oh, yeah. When I was playing, when I first came across the crates, I was like, thank God I've played other Resident Evil games, because I don't know how long it would have taken me to make the connection that you can just bust these open with the knife.
Right. There is one in the stairway to the garage. So this is like very possible to miss. When you go into the garage stairway,
there's a thing.
It has a note. You can examine a crate that tells you like, oh, you couldn't open this with your bare hands. And I'm like,
it makes it seem like you need a key.
Right.
No, but I did bust that with the knife.
Yeah.
But if I didn't have that past game knowledge, I don't know that I would have.
Mm-hmm. And I guess like you have to go past it to get the knife from the cop at the window, and then turn around toward the garages, and maybe that's when they intended you to see it.
Yeah.
But it's weird that they have to tutorialize crates, but I could just be so ingrained in the series that it's just like, box, better break it open. Hope there isn't a snake inside.
Yeah. It might be, once again, like for me as well, like playing other games, I knew what to do. Mm-hmm. But I'm suspicious that there really isn't any kind of like clear messaging that like crates are breakable.
They are. This game, similarly to The Last of Us, does use the color yellow to indicate shit that you can do. Mm-hmm. And they do have yellow tape on them. That's my only defense, I would say. Do you want to talk about bosses?
Sure.
Did you have any notes on bosses? Is my question.
No, I didn't. I was just thinking about them like, I think they're fine for like what they are, but none of them like really stand out as being like a great part of the game to me.
I'm glad that you say that, because that was also kind of my takeaway.
Yeah, like I feel like they in my mind like work better as set pieces. The only one I feel like I liked mechanically was Marguerite. Mm-hmm. Because she's like running around. It's like 2 floors. You just kind of have to keep your wits about you and like blast her. Yeah. But a classic formula.
Yes.
But like I think like Jack in the garage with the car.
Jack in the garage. That one is good.
Is cool. I didn't notice the keys on my first attempt. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that one has like a sense. Like that one has a sense of escalation to it. Yeah, the chainsaw fight.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, like they're not. I don't think any of them were bad.
Yeah.
But yeah, as I said, none of them like stand out to me.
Yeah, I think that they are all good set piece. They're good to watch, and that sucks because you do have to play them. Mm-hmm. So there are some instances of them where like they're not like unfun necessarily. I would argue that the chainsaw one probably takes too long. If they had just make Jack more lethal, like have him kill you earlier and just cut his health. cut his health in half. Mm-hmm. Because it just takes, it's like a 25-minute boss, but it's not at all that long. But it's like very long for like a such an up close intense fight.
Yeah, it is satisfying to use the chainsaw though.
True. Sucks that they break it.
Yeah.
You can apparently unlock a circular saw by doing some achievement, which is like similar to the chainsaw, so that's cool, but what are you gonna do? Mm-hmm. But no, I did want to, you hit the nail on the head there, is that I do want to shout out Jack in the Garage, because it to me is what Jack's boss fight, his regular boss fight, should have been more of, where it's like you trying to use the environment to slow him down while you deal damage, as opposed to just like a one-on-one fight. And the scene where he gets up out of the fire and fucking gets in the, like, tears the roof off the car and gets in and tries to drive your head into a girder is so good. It had me in my chair with the VR headset on, like doing this, where I'm leaning all the way over here, being like, get your gross face away from me. Because it's really uncomfortable to have somebody virtually even that close to you.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's a really good set piece, as all the bosses really are.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's my only thought on that.
Now I'm trying to think. You don't have one with Lucas.
Until the DLC, yeah.
Okay. I was going to say, what do they have in place of that?
That's when Jack's boss fight is.
Okay, yeah, so you make it out in that, okay.
Yeah, and then he gets to be a big dude.
Mm-hmm.
And then you give... Okay. Okay, this is something I mentioned to you off the podcast.
Yes.
Because after Jack's boss fight, you have to make a choice... in big giant quotes here,
mm-hmm.
between whether you're going to give your final vaccine to Mia, the person that you came to save and rescue,
and also your wife,
who you've proven through trial and error at this point that she will not just be normal.
Mm-hmm.
She will cut your arm off with a chainsaw when given the opportunity, and kill you. Or some lady
yep.
you just met and technically made the vaccine. That's the one argument that I can see.
Yeah, but Zoe seems to me like she's immune, right? Because she's been living there for like a long time and doesn't seem to show any signs of being infected. Which also makes it feel like a non-choice,
mm-hmm.
right? Like you don't really know her at all other than as a voice on the phone,
mm-hmm.
and she seems like she's doing fine.
Yeah, she is not. So I don't know, because it's a Resident Evil game and therefore the plot is extremely convoluted.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm fairly certain that she is only not like a psycho killer because Evelyn doesn't like her.
Mm.
Like Evelyn the child, who is a weird ghost creation,
mm-hmm.
bioweapon strain of a disease, likes Mia and sees Mia as her mother.
Right.
And therefore Zoe she didn't like because she filled a similar role and just ignored, and I guess she could just go. I could be entirely wrong about this, but that's just what I picked up. And it's lame a lot because, like, it does feel like they're treated really inconsistently. And it's like, how is this, like, even a viable bioweapon if the bioweapon can just choose it doesn't want to work on some people?
Right.
So there's a lot of issues there. But it still seems like Zoe doesn't need to be.
No, yeah. Like, she seems like she's... Yeah, like it doesn't feel like it has any kind of proper setup to, like, be a choice at all. Like, I've heard some people say online that they, like, really disliked Mia, like, for trying to kill you and stuff, and I'm like, oh, she was possessed. Like, I don't know, I feel like you can easily poke holes in any kind of argument against picking Mia, like, very easily, like wet tissue paper.
Yeah. Though also, Mia is not I would give you that Mia isn't really a sympathetic character because we don't know anything about her.
Right, but we know more about her than Zoe.
Well, arguably, because she was like a secret government agent who, like, vanished.
At least we know that, right?
Well, we know it after that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, they don't do a great job of characterizing anyone in this game. But that honestly just makes the choice easier because the one that you're given a reason to care about seems like the one you should care about.
Yeah.
And also the Mia ending sucks. If you do the Mia ending...
you mean the Zoe ending?
Or the Zoe ending, rather. Yeah, if you do the Zoe ending, Mia cannot resist the control, and she dies. So it's just the same outcome, but worse, is basically what happens.
Weird.
And is non-canonical as well, because in the end of Zoe, obviously, Zoe's not chosen. Right.
Just while it came up in conversation, Mia cuts your arm off.
Sure does.
At the end of the guest house part. But then you wake up with it just sewn on, and it's like... what was the point of that?
I think it is to give them an excuse to put a wristwatch on you.
You don't need to have your arm taken off for that.
No, you sure don't. But
It's just so weird because it's something I didn't even think about at first. And I'm like, wait a minute. Like, is this ever going to come back up?
kind of no.
Yeah, it's like, is it my hand going to mutate and fall off and become like a weird crawling hand?
Yeah, if they
Whatever
did, like,
that D&D monster is that's like a crawling hand.
I think you're thinking of that monster from the Addams Family
Well,
module.
it is that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I'm thinking if they had a scene that was just straight out of Evil Dead 2,
Yeah.
where the hand like crawls around and tries to smash plates on your head, I would be pretty into that. All things can VR Evil Dead 2, hell yeah, sign me up. But unfortunately, no.
Yeah, I think it would be too hard to do that without it being silly, I think. But
Who gives a shit?
good point.
No, it isn't. But no, importantly, I've always read that scene as them implying that they were going to give you the regenerative virus. And I definitely thought they did, and they didn't. Like, you don't have to take a vaccine yourself. So what the fuck? Like, why? It doesn't make any sense. And I don't know how they reattached your hand and had it work just perfectly fine.
Maybe it's supposed to signal that like the Baker family is like does experiments on humans and they could sew your arm back on.
Yeah, they're medical
Like
geniuses.
Like it's supposed to like allude to that kind of stuff maybe, but that's the only thing I could think of. Like,
yeah. No, yeah, it's weird.
One thing I wanted to talk about were the key doors.
Oh, yeah, like the crow.
Yeah,
the
a little bit of
scorpion.
that Metroidvania style design. Yeah, I just thought it was interesting. Like the one that stands out in my mind, they gate. It's a classic video game thing where they just gate some doors. Like you need specific keys to get through them that you get throughout the course of the game. But one instance where it stood out to me where it like felt pretty Metroid was going back to Lucas's room, because like you go, it's later in the game and like coming back to the main house and going into a new room and it being like a little kid's room, and like you read like some diary entries and you find out like how to get up to the secret attic entryway. Like that felt a lot like coming back to an old area and like finding something new.
Yeah.
In a way that I really liked and kind of would have liked to have seen more of.
Yeah, I think that if you... And I mean, this is arguably the problem with the really small area design that I do love and think is great. I think that the problem arises that you kind of run out of... You can't really put all that many new things into it without it seeming weirdly huge.
Yeah, like, it just... You go back to the main house a few times for stuff, but, like, you never go back to the second house, like, where Marguerite is. You know, I don't know. You could have just, I think, added a few more instances where you use the keys to open doors to get something new.
Yeah, I think the second house in particularly could have been expanded a good bit in order to just allow for that. And not even, like, big, giant things. Just, like, throw in another door that once you get a key, you can go back and there's just, like, a treasure room in there. Just, like, some bullets and stuff.
Just something to reward you for remembering it.
Yeah. That kind of stuff is always interesting. And
and another one that stands out is the game pushes you towards this explicitly eventually, but like as soon as I got through the second house and unlocked the shortcut back to the yard, I went back into the main house and opened the crow door and got the rocket launcher.
Grenade launcher,
not the
It wouldn't normally be a problem, but this is Resident Evil.
Yeah, got the grenade launcher. And felt like super smart for remembering that crow door was there.
Right.
So yeah, like just in, you know, it's in the room with the deer. So it's like easy to remember. Like, I don't know, that there was just a few instances of like really like well thought out design there that like I just wish there were a few more of.
Yeah. It does feel like a lot of the really great design falls in that first house. Like, especially like 'cause your wrap up with the first house is going up into grandma's room. Or no, it's in the master bedroom. Grandma's room, so you get the shotgun. But
Grandma's in there though.
yeah, and she's in there, and there's like a painting or like a portrait of Jack and stuff, and you do a little puzzle, and it shifts the bed back. And when you go down the bed, the bed staircase,
You go down the bed.
You go down the bed case, the stair bed, into the basement. You can then open a door. That is the door that goes back into that room in the basement that you could never access before. And so you kind of bust out and it interconnects, and it's like a little shortcut up to the save room. And it's very good. Like I do really love the design of that house. And then you can raise a bridge in the second house, and that's it.
Yeah.
There's really nothing there. So it would have been nice to have a little bit more.
Yeah, like the second house feels like the obvious missed potential there, because like the third area where Lucas is feels like it's supposed to be a more linear like progression towards the end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lucas would have been great in a home haunt situation. He's the guy with the plywood out back who's putting together like a spooky ghost house for kids.
Oh, and one other thing that I wanted to mention while we're talking about the design of the house. We're talking about how like this takes inspiration, or it seems to anyway, from like Outlast or things like Amnesia. But it almost kind of feels like it borrows from like walking simulators as well. Like there are parts of playing this that almost kind of felt like playing Gone Home or something like that. Like you're walking around like in an abandoned house, like picking up and reading things, you know?
Yeah.
I like the mix of influences in it.
The amount of this game that I liked in VR, none of it was as much as I liked just exploration. Like looking around the house in a way that feels natural, and like me actually angling my head to like get a better look at stuff. Like, yeah, it gives you that Gone Home feeling, especially in the calm moments where you are a little bit afraid because there's atmosphere and you feel like something bad could happen, but at the time there isn't anything immediately like standing against you, and you have all of these opportunities to just kind of like dig through the garbage and try and find shit. And like, yeah, that's super good. And I wish that, and it fits the genre really well because it is a survival horror game. Like, actively scavenging does reward you. So yeah, that kind of stuff just worked really well, and it does work best in the main house, but I'd argue that it keeps rewarding you for looking around at least.
Yeah, just let you stew in the atmosphere a bit.
Hell yeah. I think at this point, I think where we are right now, I want to talk a bit about the DLC.
Okay.
And there are 2 DLC packs that I played. There are 2 additional ones that I did not play because the other 2... the 2 I played are Chris's story, which is called Not a Hero or something, and then The End of Zoe. And the other 2 are Banned Footage Volume 1 and Banned Footage Volume 2, which are both just minigame collections, weirdly.
Okay.
It's like play cards, there's like a survival mode, and then there's like, I don't know, Connect 4. That isn't what it is, but there's like some other like little minigames.
Pretty sneaky, sis.
Yeah,
I did not play any of the DLC.
Yeah, and that's fair.
Yeah.
And having played it, I don't know if I would recommend it. Not a Hero is exactly what I thought it would be, which is you're playing as Chris Redfield, who's in a paramilitary group, and therefore it's just Resident Evil 7, but it isn't scary anymore, and you just shoot everything, and you have a lot of bullets and guns. And it's boring, and it's not very good, and the puzzles are really bad. Like, the puzzles in Not a Hero are like, don't step on this giant fucking
Button.
thing. Yeah, like there are literally panels that are the size of like 3 cows in a line, and they're just like, don't, oh, maybe you'll step on it and blow up. It's like, no, I won't, because it's huge. And actually, I want to make mention of just a few things in each of the games, or in each of the DLCs, in order to keep this really brief and to explain what I think about them. And Chris's problem is that it takes everything the base game does really well and flips it around so it does it really bad instead. The puzzles aren't very good, the combat is too easy, and the enemy placement in the main game I think is like really good. They tend to they rarely just drop something from the ceiling on you, and when it does happen, it's really unexpected and it works. In the DLC, the enemy placement feels like I'm playing an 8-year-old's Mario Maker level, because it's just like you go into a room and they're like, oh, there's 10 of them, what are you gonna do? It's like, well, you gave me an automatic shotgun that starts with like 60 bullets. I'm gonna kill them all and move on with my day. And the guns don't feel as satisfying because they're just overly powerful and they all have like this weird gas effect to them. I don't know, it's not great. That's pretty much it on that one. Because I want to focus this really on the end of Zoe, because I knew who Chris Redfield was, and I knew what Chris Redfield was about, and that was guns.
And punching boulders.
And he gets to do lots of that. The last part of it is like, I could spend a whole podcast talking about what I don't like about that DLC, but the last part of it, you rip like a metal grate out of the grounds with your bare hands, and it's absurd. And you jump down in, and I'm like, well, at least we know he's still superhuman strong. But the end of Zoe stars a character named Joe, and I didn't have any...
Joey.
Yes, Joey.
The end of Joey.
And I did not have any preconception of who Joe was, because I don't know him, and I've never seen him before, and he's not mentioned ever. And so, when I jumped into it, what I was expecting was not a game where you just punch all the enemies.
Okay, I did hear about this. You play as Jack's brother, right?
Yep.
And he just punches everything.
He doesn't get guns. You can craft single-use spears that you throw at people, and it deals huge amounts, like kills most things in one hit. But they're crafting things, so they're very limited. But the punching also is kind of... So, I'm so distressed by this. I love how wild this is. Like, somebody was like, you play a Resident Evil game that's like real spooky and sneaky, and then after that you play the same Resident Evil game, except you punch things by doing fist combos with the right and left trigger, and you pick up little stick figures with boxing gloves to increase your strength, and then at the end you get a robot hand that can like do a force punch that obliterates people's heads. And I'd be like, that's hysterical, I love that, let me play it right now. And they put so much work into making it do anything in the engine, and I'm like very proud of it for it, but the design just isn't there.
They tried to be sensitive and not go too hard on the stereotyping of the Baker family, and make them sympathetic in the end. And then they were like, "Oh, we did that, so like let's put in a hillbilly boxer." Yes.
It's so goofy, and like, I don't think this happens in the main game, but I can't confirm because I don't think I ever died 8 times in 10 minutes. But I did in the end of Zoe, because they're enemies that will just fuck you up, and so you have to do all this stealth to get around people. And we will put a fucking clip in this episode, I swear to God, because I took a clip, because the stealth is so bad that you can literally punch a door open and sprint into a room, and then the enemy just won't know that you're there. It's like unbelievable. So anyway, you go through all this, and the problem really is just that like they couldn't make this function as a Resident Evil game, so it feels like a totally separate kind of game. And there are way too many areas where you're just wading through water and there are alligators in them.
To punch.
You can't punch the alligators.
Oh.
They just kill you instantly if they touch you.
Mm.
And so I turned the difficulty to easy, because after you die a bunch of times, it prompts you to do that. And just ran through the rest of it just for the experience of it. So it's a little weird, but the important things here are Zoe at some point spontaneously after the events of the main game just like crystallized, like turned into a weird crystal lady.
Yeah, like when you get overcome by the fungus or whatever.
It's when you get hit. It's what happened to Jack after you stab him with the cure, right?
And I think it happened with when you killed Marguerite too. She like crystallized.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I think it's just like if you're infected and you were like quote killed, that's what happens to you.
Yeah. So that happens to Zoe, but for seemingly no reason. And your goal...
Well, that's the end.
Yeah. is to save her, which you do. And there's like an implication that like she gets saved by Chris, of course, and the rest of Umbrella.
Yeah. Did they have to ride back home on a jet ski?
No, but they do get on a helicopter, I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
And like Ethan calls her and is like, I told you I'd send somebody for you. And I was like, if I was her, I'd be like, fuck off. You left me to die. But either way, that's the plot of Zoe, so that you know what happens with her, and I guess the reason to cure her, and also why curing her is not canon.
Zoe will return in Resident Evil Village.
Yeah. And then
maybe.
Let's hope not, but if she does, I guess that's okay. The not a hero ending, Lucas becomes a big monster, but seemingly for no reason, because he was cured. He just like, you shoot him in the head with a gun, and he's like, you shot me in the head. And
with
then
a gun.
With a gun, and I'm bleeding. And then the screen goes black, and then he just falls down from the ceiling as like the Hulk. And you just shoot him a whole bunch of times there. Yeah. It's not a good boss fight, and I didn't like it. But he does get a boss fight, so...
It's supposed to be like a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde kind of thing, because he's like the genius character.
Yep. Yeah, and the Mr. Hyde version of Lucas, I think, only ever says the phrase, my head!
Sounds about right.
That's my DLC wrap-up.
Nice. I have two more things I wanted to touch on.
Okay.
And the first one, we touched on it briefly earlier, but the Lucas escape room VHS tape. It's a standout moment of the game, I think. And also, like, note to developers, VR escape rooms
are
cool, yes. But I think it feels like completely unique from anything else. So like it does feel like a vignette, as you kind of used to describe them earlier. So it's got like unique assets. It's got like the animatronic clown and stuff, and it's got the room with the balloons in it.
Yep.
And other unique things. And it's clever that like watching the tape is like how you get the ability to like cheat the puzzle later as Ethan by just knowing one of the combinations. So it's really well done, and it is frustrating that you can see it coming a mile away, the oil on the floor, like the cake is just going to fall in it and it'll explode. But I don't know, it's just a real standout section. Like it almost makes me like harkens back to like what's good about the beginning of the game. Like you don't have any guns. It's a little bit more psychological, and like you're just trying to like explore a space and try and like to escape, like it really dials in on that survival horror feeling. It is scary, and you are trying to survive it. Yeah.
It is super good. Like, it's the part of it that isn't very survival horror is literally just the fact that like there isn't a guy who will punch your head until you're until you're died. And that part is like, so it reduces a little bit of that management, but it does feel more pure, like.
Well, I always felt like someone could come into the room, you know? Like, there was always, like, this feeling of, like, unknown, like, maybe something could come kill me.
Yeah. And yeah, I feel like I agree. It is a highlight. It's one of the things that I'm going to remember about this game, even though I say that and I forgot about it.
Yeah, that seems unbelievable
Yeah.
to me. Like, you got to it, and you were like, is there a way that I can cheat this? I can super solve this? I think is what you said. It's like, no, not that I know.
Yeah, I really plowed through this game when it first came out, so...
Yeah, I guess that makes sense.
Yeah.
But, yeah, and it's the closest that this game gets to, like, feeling like Saw-esque, which I feel like was inevitable.
And, like, Lucas's character was, like, designed to really emulate, and that's the best that they did with it.
Yeah, no, I think that was smart, because it doesn't feel too specific or, like, derivative or anything, like, that could have felt hokey. But, like, there isn't, like, a TV in there that comes on and, like, some kind of weird puppet talks to you.
Right.
Which very easily could have happened in this. But the other thing I wanted to bring up was Grandma. Grandma Evie, because... the grandma, I think, stands out from the very beginning. Like, you do the dinner scene, and then she's the only one left there. And I was like, is she going to do something? And then the next time I saw her just sitting around, I'm like, is she going to do something? But I never attacked her, and I don't know if something happens if you do. But I was like, I'm just going to wait for her to do something, and I bet she's going to get me with a jump scare later in the game. And I just kept thinking that. But then she stops showing up for a long time. And then, like, so I never really thought anything of it until, like, right before it's revealed that she is Evie. Like, you're going through the house or wherever you are, and you go into a room, and the empty wheelchair is there. And I'm like, ooh, that's such a great detail. And, like, you put it together, and you're like, ooh, I love that foreshadowing. And then it turns out that the grandma was the girl the whole time.
Yep.
And I'm a sucker for... that kind of a twist when it's pulled off well. Yeah,
I fully agree. I think, I mean, I don't have like a lot to discuss about it, but I think this game is pretty good about doing setup and payoff with a lot of the things that it does. Like, everything is thematically tied to each other in like nebulous kinds of ways, and having Evie be grandma... and that's a sentence. And sort of like playing it with that knowledge also gives you sort of like an appreciation for like what is she doing at any given time. It's just, yeah, it's cool, and I like that there was that attention to detail to use her in that effective of a way. For all I know, that could have been like the elevator pitch for the plot, where they just like, the grandma's the mastermind the whole time, and they're like, how do we fucking work that out, because that scene with the wheelchair is going to be real good.
Designed backwards from empty wheelchair.
Yeah, this is back forward design.
Yes.
It's not top down.
Yeah, like, unless you wanted to talk some more about the boat, I feel like that's all I got.
Now, if there's anything I don't want to talk about, it is the boat.
Okay. We touched on it enough, I think, in the first half.
So I was wondering if we had any Series F thoughts.
My Series F thoughts are... this game really impressed me. Because I like the demo a lot. Like, we just do this with stuff every once in a while. Like, we'll find a thing we really like, and then we'll have all of our friends play it and aren't able to really tell how much they like it in comparison to us. But, so, like, I think I played this through at least twice and watched other people play it. I liked the demo a whole lot, but when we talked about the demo on the podcast, and I remember thinking, like, we talked about, like, things we liked about it and how like the main game might be, and then my like cynical brain kept thinking like, oh, like I bet the main game will like be more AAA and like do like, you know, just go in a completely different direction and like grow into something I don't like off of this, you know. And I was pleasantly surprised that isn't the case. As I said, I'm impressed, and I'm impressed because of how like not AAA bloated this feels. Like, it gets there a little bit at the end with the boat stuff, which we both didn't like. But, like, overall, like, I like that it's smaller scale. I like that there really aren't that many enemies. I like, like, it seems rare that you get a AAA, like, IP, especially an IP that's this popular, that releases a new game that's this, like, streamlined or, like, condensed or, like, smaller scale. And it, like, and not, like, an open world, like, forced bullshit thing that doesn't fit at all. But, so yeah, really impressed. I think I like a lot of the puzzles and the way that they integrated stuff from like the first 3 games into this, and have like really reimagined it in the style of like an Outlast or more modern haunted house style horror games, as we like to call them.
Remember to credit us anytime that you use that phrase.
Yeah, and it feels really seamless. Like, I don't want to like overstate it, but like, I feel like this game's like firing on all the cylinders I wanted it to. Like, I'm really surprised how well they've just gone back to the drawing board and like rebuilt Resident Evil as this incarnation. And I'm really looking forward to 8, because from what I've seen, it looks like they're going to take what they established here and then build back in some of the more weird supernatural, like Resident Evil 4 kind of feeling stuff back in, and like that sounds really exciting to me. So I'm really looking forward to that. And just very impressed, very pleasantly surprised by how much I liked this.
I was always under the impression that the reason that they gave this Resident Evil the subtitle Biohazard was to sort of put it as a restart for the series. Even if it is still numbered 7, it also harks back to that, and as like sort of a desire to go back to what made the original series work. And I'm of the impression that there cannot be a Resident Evil game that takes itself like completely seriously. I think that overall this game does a better job of it than most. And it was the goal this time. I think there's an argument to be made that there are several Resident Evil games that are tongue-in-cheek, and that was the point. But this one feels very real. Like, they really tried to nail down the tone that they were going for. And so in conclusion, this game is really short, which is surprising for a AAA game. The game itself is only like 8 to 10 hours, depending on how you play the game. I settled pretty comfortably in about an 8.5-9 hour kind of timeline, and at least 7 or 8 of those hours are good. I think that it keeps evolving what it is that you are doing as you get more of an arsenal and are given different challenges to complete. And it manages to stay interesting through the majority of its runtime. And honestly, like, it's been a long time since I've played a survival horror that could do that. And I'm also very impressed. I think this is a really good game, and I think that it's a really good game for the Resident Evil franchise, which had been sort of in a decline for a while. People took the games less seriously than they took themselves, which was hard to believe after Resident Evil 5 and 6. So, yeah, big fan. Hope that Resident Evil 8 stays in a similar way, but, I guess we can potentially get back to you on that.
Yeah, it does seem like it's kind of going for a similar structure. At least this is all speculation, but, like, it seems like Vampire Lady has, like, an immediate family, and, like, they're the antagonists. It's the way it reads, so.
And they also...
and it's in a castle, which is cool.
Yeah. And they eat people, and they're doing some biotech
Yeah, there's like a
experiments.
biohazard, and like Chris Redfield will show up at the end.
Also, this game uses the word necrotoxin on more than one occasion, which is such a made-up word that it hurts me. But it's also very possible that it's a real word, and that would hurt me more. Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense, right?
Sort of.
As like a
death toxin?
Yeah, like it makes like undead, like people come back to life.
I mean, fair. That's the thing, I guess.
I mean, totally. It's like a total science fiction word, but
Right.
like it does technically like make sense for what it is.
Mm-hmm. Can't wait for that part of the epilogue of Resident Evil 8 where we get more
Ooh, it
science.
gets to be a bloodborne virus this time because there's vampires.
Exactly. I'm excited for Bloodborne 2 coming out
Yeah.
in May under the name Resident Evil Village. Thank you for listening to this meaningless speculation and also NOCLIP podcast this week.
What are we talking about next time?
What's your heart rate at, Andy?
Well, let me put my thumb over the sensor.
Okay, we're going to be talking about Ring Fit Adventure, which rhymed with censor. I like kind of the
Nice.
rhythm that had going.
Awesome!
So in case we haven't given you enough tonal whiplash over the last 2 weeks, we got even worse coming up. Until that time, you can get a hold of us. All of our contact information is on our website at noclippodcast.com or on splattershot.pro. Splatoon 3 got announced. Let's get excited. Use that URL. There you can find links to our Discord, our YouTube, all of our old episodes, including episodes on Resident Evil 1, Resident Evil 7 Beginning Hour, Resident Evil 4. We've talked about a lot of these games.
Mm-hmm. Also Amnesia, I guess.
Yeah, we're going to plug this into a playlist, in fact, on YouTube called Horror Games, which you can peruse at probably in a couple months from now when they're more in season, but we wanted to talk about it now.
Mm-hmm.
It's our horror, and we want it now. Fucking cure that like button.
Make the choice between curing the like or the subscribe button. The subscribe button is Mia. Say that one so you can be notified of future videos.
So that Mia will still be alive to notify you of future videos.
If you click subscribe, we can welcome you to the family, son.
There it is. That's much better.
Perfect. I got there.
Welcome to NOCLIP, the podcast that's like a book club for people who don't think books
Exist.
I, for some reason, wanted to say podcasts there, even though that doesn't make any sense.
Podcasts don't reward me enough for being good at them.
That's true. Maybe it's because we aren't good at them.